All right, Rob Brown here with you and Brendan Martin on this Thursday morning, September 19th. Lot to talk about, man. We got what's going on at Florida. That game with Mississippi State catching a lot of people's attention. I don't know what the Vegas odds makers are doing with that line. It's going to be an interesting one. Which team wins and what happens to that team from here on out? We have Coach Matt Dean, Tommy Kane from over in Charlotte, ULM AD John Hartwell. Also, Gary Harris tied 100.9, Channel 23 in Tuscaloosa. And late in the hour, Will Hearn, one of our interns from over in Athens, Bulldog Illustrated. We're going to cover all 16, and that's the on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, anywhere. Brendan, I love that hat. We'll be right back. Smash that subscribe button before you go, though, and allow notifications on your Android and iPhone. And every day, tell a friend who tells a friend who tells more friends about sidelines.
Get your pen and paper.
Pen and paper handy, because it's time for class right now. Here we go.
Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk sporty to me.
All right, man. We have got a wild one today. Tommy Kane over in Charlotte, ACC country, and Matt Dean in Memphis. And again, John Hartwell join us here in a minute. Guys, John, welcome aboard. I know you've got to take a trip out to Austin. Y'all are playing Texas this weekend. So it's going to be a fun time. We had your coach, Bryant Vincent, on last week. Really impressive. I liked his attitude. I liked his whole demeanor about how he's doing with coaching. Every day, people love to hit the panic button. No need to panic. Your team's 3-0, 2-1, 1-2. You got 9 more games to go. Long season ahead. And Tommy, I want to start with you. The ACC, Florida State, you know, they were really acting like, let's be honest, a 2-year-old throwing a tantrum when they didn't get that piece of candy they wanted. And I'm a big Mike Norvell fan because I love what he did in Memphis. And then he goes to Florida State. But I think he lost that locker room last year when those guys, all 31 guys, quit on him, and they went out there and just got curb stomped. Didn't even put up a fight in the bowl game. Then they lose in Dublin against Georgia Tech, lose at Boston College, and Memphis beats them. And now it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't have talked about leaving the ACC. You and I, and we've all talked about, I don't want to see that conference implode. And John doesn't, Matt, nobody does. So here they are. Clemson's been more quiet about it, but state of the ACC right now with all these games left to play.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head right there, Rob. There's a lot of games left to play. Florida State obviously is not in the position they thought they would be at the beginning of the season. I mean, it just keeps getting worse and worse. Georgia Tech lost. At first, everybody thought, oh, my gosh, they lost to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's proven to be a pretty good team this year. They're going to have a pretty good, solid season. The coach there is doing a great job. Then Boston College, everybody's like, oh, well, Boston College, wow, but Boston College is actually a good team.
Yeah.
Then you lose to Memphis. And then you're like, whoa, okay, there's something going on here at Florida State. And I think what you're seeing, guys, in my opinion, is I think more so than ever in college football these days, chemistry and buy-in is so important. And it's got to happen like so quickly because of the transfer portal and all these new players coming in. And you got a new quarterback who's been, around all around the country multiple times already. And there's just having the kids at a very early stage of the season buy into what the coach is trying to get them to do, buy into the scheme, understand the scheme, and understand the style of play. It has to happen really quick. And I think at Florida State, they haven't even come close to it.
Yeah. John, last week, Bryant Vincent, your coach at ULM, said when we got here, there were like 31 guys in the transfer portal that wanted to leave, and we didn't make any effort to go after them. It's like, you don't want to be here? Hit the road, pal. Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. Big John, you know, at the Citadel, how many times did you want to quit the first week, the first month, and you rode home and you know, hey, I used to go to summer camp at Camp Deerwood in Brevard, North Carolina. Every Sunday, you got one phone call, and it was 3 minutes. Hi, Mom and Dad. I'm having a great time here at camp. I'm getting 3 good meals a day. We're doing a lot of physical exercise and PT. I get to box, play tennis, ride horses, having a great time. I love you. Goodbye. And kind of like basic training in the Marine Corps. Mom, I'm at Paris Island Camp, Lejeune, North Carolina. I don't know where I am. What's your problem, numb nuts? You don't know where you are? John, talk about that. I'm hopped up on coffee beans this morning.
Tommy makes a great point. You got to have buy-in, and we on our roster, 73 of roughly 115 guys are new to our program this year. So you got to be an X's and O's person. You've got to be a player development person. But like we've talked about several times over the last few weeks, you've got to be a psychologist as well. You've got to know what pushes kids' buttons.
Yeah.
You've got to know some methods and in a pretty rapid pace to bring chemistry to your team, because there are a lot of moving parts to it. And, we've all seen it through years in athletics. It's not always the most talented team that wins. And if you have a cancer on your team or a handful of cancers, they can trump talent, very, very often. And so it's those coaches who can manage the locker room, figure out the right combinations, all of those things. And that's why, man, it's getting tougher and tougher with all the outside variables there.
Yeah. Matt, looking at this, good morning, Blind Squirrel Sports, gentlemen. I love that guy. He's a big Georgia fan. Matt, we're talking about culture. We're going to get to the games here after this, but throw in your 2 cents worth on that, building that culture and not having a locker. I couldn't look. I'm going to be completely transparent. Deion Sanders doesn't even make in-home visits. It's all about him. Players only care as much as they know how much the coaches care. You've coached a lot. Tommy has played and coached. All of y'all have. But your take on what we're talking about.
Good morning, guys. Good to be back at the squares. Tommy and John are spot on. Another thing I will add to it is I think development is really important, more so than we talk about it, because in the era of the portal, it's almost like NFL free agency. So I'll give you a great example. The first 2 weeks, I follow Oregon a lot because my son works on the staff. He's director of player personnel. People were writing them off because they didn't look flashy, right? They got Dylan Gabriel. We turned it over a couple times. Only beat Boise by 3. Now, I will tell you guys this because I watched the game. Boise's going to be in contention for that number 12 spot. That's my opinion. They have one of the best running backs in college football.
Yeah.
Okay. So week 3, they look a little bit more like themselves. They got some guys off injured list. Their offensive line got a starter back. And you know what? Going into the bye week, what are they talking about? They're talking about self-scout. They're talking about growing this week to continue the progress. It's not a bye week. It's a work week, as Dan Lanning has been saying. So I think in college football now, that's what's really impressed me with Texas is they had a lot of continuity coming back from last year. I know you're playing them, John, but to go into Michigan, I don't care what you say about what Michigan lost. That's a really tough environment. And they've looked Texas has looked the best out of anyone in the country early on. But in athletics, things change. It's week-to-week proposition. Who would have thought Kentucky would play Georgia the way they did after South Carolina basically bum rushed them, right? And that's why it's really a week-to-week proposition. It's the believability in your locker room that every week we have to bring our A game or we could get beat. And in the SEC, it's just amazing to me. Like, I'm really intrigued about the Tennessee matchup with Oklahoma this week because Tennessee has looked by far as good as anyone in the country.
Yeah.
And I say that because I still think NC State's going to win 8 or 9 games, Tommy. I could be wrong. And they really put it to NC State. Forget the State game. And I think going to Oklahoma is going to be a true test, and we're going to find out a little bit more about the balls.
Well, Tommy, talking about the ACC right now, Fran Brown's up at Syracuse. I watch ACC Network a lot. I like to watch the Sun Belt. I like to watch stuff. The SEC, I like to see what's going on around us. That's good that you've got this kind of competition. Dave Doran in his 9th or 10th year there at NC State. Here's my thing, though. Grayson McCall. I thought he would come in and be just dominant because I've watched him at Coastal Carolina for a while. But, again, long way to go. But, Florida State's down. Somebody else is filling in that gap. And, again, your thoughts about Miami. I mean, they jumped on Florida. Yeah. We got a big Gator audience on this channel as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about Grayson McCall. I think Wolfpack Nation and everybody in the ACC was really pretty hyped up to see him come in after being a 3-time Player of the Year down there at Coastal Carolina in the conference and seeing what that's what we've been lacking the last couple of years is consistent quarterback play. And I think, again, it goes back to what we just talked about. I mean, I think he's a great young man. I think he's very talented, but just being thrown in a new system. Yeah. And having spring training and spring practice to try to get it done, and then your only preseason game is really your inter squad, red-white game or whatever. In this, no matter how many times you've played and started behind center at quarterback, Coastal Carolina, no knock on them, great program, but that stuff, speed of play and that style of play doesn't match up to the ACC, much less does add up to the SEC and the big time, guys as well. So I think what you're seeing from somebody like Grayson McCall, and I think you see it a lot around the country at all, especially when you're a quarterback and you transfer in, you're learning a whole new system. You're learning a whole new playbook. You're learning a different what the coaches expect. You're trying to get your chemistry and your timing down with all the players and the receivers. And I think Grayson McCall right now, he's injured, so he's not going to play this week.
Yeah.
I think he needs more reps and he's just a step behind. And I don't know if it's going to pan out for the Wolfpack with him. But
yeah, you hope he does. I mean, you bring a quarterback in who's been around, who's got those kind of stats. John, Rob Anderson, Valdosta, Georgia, asked Hartwell if he saw his defensive coordinator on Sports Center last night. I don't know if you were up that late, John. I'm kidding. Like, you don't have anything to do as an athletic director.
Yeah, I actually didn't see it on there, but I heard about it this morning. Ernest Hill, who's our defensive coordinator, who was with Coach Vincent at UAB. Actually, here's a tidbit, Rob. Right down the road from St. Paul's and UMS right on Old Shell Road in Mobile. Ernest Hill was the head coach at McGill-Tulane High School, a Catholic high school in Mobile.
Yeah,
so a little background there. But yeah, I think he had a quote in there last night about facing Arch Manning, and we have obviously Arch was a high school star in New Orleans, and we have several New Orleans area kids on the team, and he made some comment about, we got a couple of guys that have beat him so far, so I'm sure that will create a little ribbing, but we've got our work cut out for us this week, and again, back to your analogy, we've got 10 games left. We had an open week in bye in week 2, and this game is important to us, and we're going to go out there. Obviously, Texas is very talented, not just the first line, but the first probably 3 lines there, and there's good reason why they're ranked number 1 in the country. We're going to go try to exercise a little ball control, try to run the ball against them, and again, this game is important to us. But next week when we go to Troy, that's the start of Sun Belt play, and that's that's in the bigger picture of things. Those Sun Belt games are more important.
Right. No, they are, and I think the interest in college football, again, it keeps growing. Matt, I'm going to throw one at you. ULM's got to go play at Texas, and then they get into the conference games. But we're starting to see some separation, but not a lot. I want to ask you about a couple of teams in the SEC. First, I want Missouri, because we cover all 16 teams in this league. I'm an Eli Drinkowitz fan just because he wears a blue and white striped seersucker suit and white bucks. He's a pretty cool guy from Alma, Arkansas, but he's very cerebral. And I asked him at Media Days a couple of years ago in Atlanta, I said, have you ever thought about what it would be like at Mizzou if you could tap into that St. Louis Cardinals fan base, passion, love, and transfer that 107 miles west on I-70 to Columbia. And he goes, man, that's a lot of things. He came up to me afterwards. He said, that's a great question. He goes, I hope I can do it. Well, looks like he's well on his way.
I like their team, and they have a lot of offensive weapons, and they've done a good job. I'll tell you, it was a struggle bus to finish off Boston College this past week, who's a really they have a nice quarterback. They can run the football. Bill O'Brien's got a ton of experience.
Yes.
It was a great win for Missouri. I am really intrigued. I feel bad for Vandy fans because they thought they were sitting at 3-0, and they got they got picked off on that. Well, they didn't get picked off, but that last drive beat them against Georgia State, right? So the Vandy Mizzou game this weekend, I think prior to this week, I would have thought Vandy would be intriguing to go up there. I still like Missouri. I like Missouri a lot because I think they have maybe the number one wide receiver in the country off the board, and they have a quarterback that'll play at the next level. I'm not saying he's going to get started right away, but they have those two pieces, and there's continuity on that offense. And I know they're missing their running back, but quite frankly, I think Missouri's a college football playoff team.
Yeah, and you answered the question about the other team, Vanderbilt. I wanted to ask about Georgia State. John, you know about that program. And Tommy, you lived in Atlanta a long time, and we're over in Atlanta a lot. You got, Del McGee, Columbus Baker, played at Auburn, a longtime coach at Georgia, great recruiter. Damian Craig, I think, is on that staff. They've got – Tommy, I'll just start with you. There's a couple of good players in the metro Atlanta area, aren't there? I mean, Georgia ain't going to get them all. Neither's Clemson or Auburn. Right. And Georgia Tech, you got to take calculus, but are you going to still come?
Yeah, well, I think that's been the hard part for Georgia Tech for so long. But, they've turned that program around down at Georgia Tech for sure. And Georgia State's got a great program. They've got a great facility down there playing in the old Turner Field. It's down there. And when they played the Olympics, they transferred that and turned that into their stadium for them. And they've got a nice program. There is a lot of talent in the state of Georgia. There's no question about it. College football, high school football is big in Georgia, not like it is in Texas or those parts of the country, but it's still big, and a lot of athletes and a lot of people to pull from. I think hopefully you'll see for the ACC and for Georgia Tech, you'll start seeing Georgia Tech really being able to tap into that local talent more. They've had a hard time with keeping those local kids around. Auburn is not too far away down the street, and so it seems like all the big studs are either Georgia and Auburn and that kind of thing for a lot of the local boys in Atlanta. But there's a lot of talent down there for sure. Yeah.
Well, and John, I'll throw this at you. You're in Louisiana. LSU can't get everybody. ULM. You came into ULM. I believe you were hired because they said we want someone to come in here and make us great again, and the best we can possibly be. As an athletic director, you do have to make some tough decisions. And then when people, though, start seeing discernible progress, then they start going, okay, I'll invest with you. Your background is a CPA. You don't have a visor or a fan on your desk like the old days, but
no pocket protector either.
That's right. Only my dad, who, by the way, my dad will never live down. The front cover of the Auburn Alumni magazine a few years ago had a picture of him and a bunch of people back in the 50s up on Toomer's Corner at this breakfast place. I'm not kidding. He had on a plaid shirt and a pocket protector. He has never lived that down. And he's an architect. He goes, I said, I thought only engineers did that, but I digress. I love engineers. Okay, but John, talk about that aspect.
Well, it's no different than we were talking about earlier, and making sure a locker room is together. It's about building a culture, and you've got to do that. Whether it's your coaching staffs, your administration, the custodians in the building. It's about building a culture, and you got to get everybody, in a positive mind frame, and not saying, well, we hadn't won in the last 20, 25 years. We just can't do it. I don't want people looking at things as obstacles. I want them looking at them as opportunities. I don't want glass half empty. People want glass half full, and you got to do that across the board. And it takes a little bit of time. My wife tells me all the time, she said, you've got to take a deep breath and be a little more patient. I said, that just is not my wheelhouse really. And
That's
I
right.
know, on a university campus, and that's part of what sometimes gets athletics a bad name across campus sometimes anyway, because we can't operate. I've always believed in my 27 years in college athletics, you've got to operate your athletics department like a private enterprise. You can't get bogged down in the red tape of the university. Now, do you have to manage it and work with it, especially if you're a state institution? Yeah, absolutely so. But you've got to be aggressive in how you deal with things, and make sure that you set that mindset. And you can't be okay with losing. I mean, that's the bottom line, and no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, and I've always said
one other thing.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, finish it. I was going to compliment you on what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, it's that culture permeates to your student athletes too, and you've got to make sure that you do that, because don't forget this. Kids are perceptive. I don't care if they're 18, 19, 22, 23 years old. They're perceptive. If you're going through the motions and you're not doing things to give them the opportunity to be successful, like you said, they don't care how much you know. They know how much you care, and you've got to be invested in them to give them the opportunity to succeed.
I totally agree with that. And Matt, we got a lot of games. I love it. South Alabama against App State. Does UF have a new coach yet? I got to ask you, Matt, as a coach, and and we all three of y'all are on this panel because you're highly cerebral and you are forgotten more than most people know about how this stuff works behind the scenes. Lane Kiffin, he's at Ole Miss. Like I say, we got the Buddy Martin show on here, SECU. Best Fridays in football with Urban Meyer. A lot of Gators, okay? A lot of folks down there in places like Pahokee and Immokalee and Sebring. Gator fans, hardcore Gator fans. What about Lane Kiffin? First off, I think Jimmy Sexton's going to get a lot of people raises here in the next few months.
Well, that's what Jimmy does well, right? I mean, Jimmy
He's a genius.
And first of all, going back to Coach Norvell, who has done a wonderful job at Memphis and then had a wonderful year last year. Didn't he get a big extension? And now that makes his situation, even though they're 0-3, probably a little bit more secure, because from a money standpoint, you really don't want to buy him out right now. But I will say this. Coaching is really, really hard. And I'm not making excuses. I'm going to give you a couple things I saw this weekend. I saw a picture after the game with Billy and his wife. They're kind of embracing a little bit. And people don't understand how hard it is on families. Okay, so I coached John's nephew, my first head job at Denison. We started off that season 1-12. I was a very successful assistant coach, got my first opportunity to be a head coach. And when you get a head coaching opportunity, usually it's not like a Cadillac. The program I inherited had not been to their own conference tournament in like 4 or 5 seasons because you had to be in the top 8. And there was 10 teams, right? So I'll never forget, we are 1-12.
Oh,
Yeah, 1-12, and they froze you. Yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
Makes 2 free throws with 1 second to go. We win, and my wife's in the stands crying. Now, the first thing I told her is I said, never sit by the parents. If you're going to come to the game, you find a corner with the little kids and don't sit by the parents. So, I mean, first of all, Lane Kiffin has got issues of winning a national championship right now. So in his mind, he doesn't want this distraction of his name being out there for any job. I'm just telling you, that's the mentality. Could he end up there? He sure could. But coaching, people have a misconception. These guys are all AI robots. They're not. There's a lot of humanity involved. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. And even if you're having a bad season, you're probably working your butt off. Some of my best coaching jobs have been some of my worst records.
Yeah. Well, a friend of mine, Coach Bryant, used to stay at his grandmother's house down in South Florida after football season every year. And he would just go down there and just unwind. And you know what he loved to talk about was where he grew up in a little small town. They were dirt poor in Arkansas. He just allowed him to get away. I think a cool guest to have on this show would be Cedric, the driver from Tuscaloosa, who's driven Coach Bryant and every coach since then. But the true stories of what it's like. Tommy Kane, you know this. You were on ACC Network for 8 years, Fox Sports Southeast. You've got your own production company, Pack Production. If you could do a story right now, a documentary, a 30 for 30 type, we're going to call this a 30 for Tommy. By the way, a 30 for 30 is more than 30 minutes. Why'd they come up with that name? And so anyway, what would you want to do a documentary on right now? Maybe something about what Matt said, what it's like behind the scenes in the life of a coach. You know they're getting paid a lot of money, but that only goes so far.
I think that's a really great question, Rob. I would do it, I think, on the grind that head coaches and assistant coaches have to go through on a day-to-day basis. I think put it this way: when I was coming out of NC State, I sat down with Coach Les Robinson at the time, and I was wanting to get into coaching myself, and that was kind of my goal for my next part of my career. And he said to me, "Look," he said, "it's a this is way before the internet. This is before NIL and all the stuff we have now, obviously." But he just basically said, "Look, it's a slimy business, and there's no other job in the country, unless you're a politician, where every morning you wake up and have to deal with seeing everybody in the paper talk about how you did your job." Or on the internet now, obviously, whatever. Like, think about it. Like, if Rob Brown had to wake up tomorrow morning and there was a big headline on the sports page about sidelines blew it yesterday on the radio show. They were terrible. Rob was this, Rob was that. That is a stressful lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then you're getting on top of that, you got the pressure to win, you got the pressure of the alumni and the boosters and everything else, and now you got the pressure of trying to not only recruit kids but keep kids that are already in your program and keep them happy. Like, it's a hard life as a head coach. And granted, from all of us that we get to see them on the sidelines on Saturdays coaching a football team, that's the highlight of those coaches' week, is that actual game time of actual play. The rest of it is a grind. And so to answer your question, I would do a behind-the-scenes story on the personal life of these coaches and what they have to deal with day in and day out, and not being able to, like in big programs, not even being able to go to the local grocery store to get stuff because they're a local celebrity, and having to deal with that, and having to deal with fans that come up and say, "Coach, you're terrible. You're blowing the season for us." Blah blah blah. I mean, that's what you get.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, that's what I would do.
Yeah, it was like people coming up to you in public when you're out at Crystal or something for a nice gourmet meal with the wife. You and Mildred are sitting there, and a guy comes up and says, "Man, you were like 17th on the sales production board in the office last month. You suck."
Right.
I mean, look, I see what the guy's saying, Charles Todd Sullivan. I don't disagree. I mean, $26 million for failure, you can take that. That's generational wealth. But you still, here's my deal. I'm going to treat people like I want to be treated myself. So if I got something to say to you, I'm going to say it to your face, not hiding behind some anonymous moniker out there in the social media or the Twitter sphere. John Hartwell. If I was going to say something to John, guys, he's 6'7", 217 pounds, works out every day, mixed martial arts. No,
yeah, I wish I was 217 pounds, Rob. Hey, Tommy, this just brings back there are only a couple of degrees of separation between athletics. So I actually played for Les at the Citadel.
Did you really?
Yes, I did. He recruited me. Yep.
Small world.
Yes. He recruited me. He was there 2 years. My lack of talent probably drove him to East Tennessee State after my sophomore year. But he's tremendous.
Oh, he's one of the best. One of the best. Yep.
Good man. Hey, a couple of things, Rob. So, back to the thing about where we were talking about, Billy Napier and what's going on there. And I see somebody in the comments section wrote, well, he's going to get, a ton of money out of that. Yeah, that's true. And probably most of the, 10 on the field guys are going to get a bunch of money, but it trickles down. If you've got, an analyst who may have left a high school job
Yeah.
and convinced his wife and kid to do that. And then all of a sudden, and they just did it in this past off season. And now they've, invested everything in going to the University of Florida, and, they may be out of job and, has a young family. And those are the things that people don't see. Yeah. The head coach and the assistants normally are taken care of, but it's the trickle down effect. And the thing is most people who have been in coaching or even in administration in a lot of cases, there are two categories of coaches: those who have been fired and those who are going to be fired. And it's just, it comes with the territory, but it's still difficult for, some of those folks.
No, it is. And I think somebody put out, I saw a statistic, Nick Saban's retirement led to 423 people's career being changed. Just set off a,
Wow.
chain effect of all these coaches leaving, replacing, and everything like that. Matt Dean, looking at the SEC, the ACC, Sun Belt, that footprint where these schools are, there are boatloads of players. Looked up Saturday night, the starting quarterback for Texas A&M in their 33-20 win at Florida is a Nashville kid.
Yeah.
Okay, Hank Brown, Bocephus. Are you sure Hank done it this way? The Conversation. What a great song, Waylon. Oh my God, and Hank. He sure did love Miss Audrey in Raising Hell. What a bunch of great lines in that song. I got a wife named Audrey. That's why I like that song. But Matt, thinking about that, all these the talent in these areas. We talked about the portal and all these guys coming and going. What about Georgia? What they're doing with Kirby Smart? Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports covers Georgia. Will Hearn's going to be on later in the show, Bulldog Illustrated. They're telling these kids, hey, just because you think the grass is greener on the other side of the road, it's still got to be cut and fertilized, and you better hope it rains. What makes you think it's going to be better? They're convincing them to stay. I mean, he doesn't have a magic wand, but if you're a coach, or Tommy or John, any of y'all, at an SEC, ACC, Sun Belt school, what are you telling the kid that's wanting to transfer at the end of his freshman year because he's not a starter?
Well, great example was, you had mentioned Florida State and all the guys that didn't play in the bowl game last year. Look at Georgia. Their guys were they showed up, and whatever Kirby's saying is resonating. I'll tell you this, my son has a lot of friends in the industry, and one of the things that people say is working for Kirby's like 4th and 1 at the copy machine. Okay, every day, everywhere, there's an intensity, and you got to be able to bring it. So, I mean, you listen to Kirby talk, man. He's got his players locked in. They want to run through the wall for the guy. And the ones that leave, he's got 2 or 3 behind that person's ready to play.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have the recruiting success over a period of time that Kirby Smart has, and you develop players, and you're a pretty good ball coach, you don't worry about stuff, Rob. You honestly don't. I mean, he just knows, hey, next person up. Next person up.
Yeah. Well, Tommy, we all saw it. Kirby, after the Kentucky game the other night, hugging Brock Vandegrift and Jamon Dumas-Johnson, who was an All-American there 2 years ago. I've left places before. I left a firm one time, and I was in tears. I didn't want to leave, but I had to. It was best for my family and me. And but I'll never forget the people who I worked with and helped me along the way. That's why when someone asks me to help, I'll knock a wall down to help. I love to give back. But that was a pretty cool story. And as a player, I mean, God, when you go back, John just talking about Les Robinson, your ears jumped up like a bunny when you showed him some carrots. I mean, like, you played for that guy. You know what I went through. There's a common bond. And it was brought up Monday night. Hunter Yurachek from the Touchdown Club, Arkansas's AD, talked about all these kids coming and going. Who's going to be in the Hall of Fame? I mean, there's value in grinding it out and sticking with something. And you know that because the guys that you played with at NC State are probably some of the closest friends you still have to this day.
Yeah, I mean, you're opening a whole can of worms here for me, Rob. I could go off.
Let's go bass fishing.
I can get up on my soapbox and talk about this for the next couple of hours. Look, I think the transfer portal is doing a lot of damage to college sports, but it's doing a lot of damage to college sports, in my opinion, especially at that level, what you're talking about, which is the loyalty to the program, the loyalty to their teammates, the loyalty to the coaches that spent all that time and resources to recruit them, and to bring them in. And I think that, I think from a coaching standpoint, it's very frustrating for all these coaches. I think that's why you saw so many of the great coaches start stepping down really quickly. When Jay Wright's stepped down after being a very successful programs at Villanova.
Yeah.
And then these guys, because what is so attractive to coaching is, yes, you love the competition. Yes, you love the day in and day out grind of coaching the sport that you love. But you also love developing these players and making them part of your family. And the fact that, like John and I just mentioning Les Robinson, we have that connection now because we know. So, I mean, you lose that when you got these kids coming and going. You lose the fact that, like, you can't develop a kid from his freshman year all the way through to his senior year to see him. Great example. One of my best friends in the world is Tom Gugliotta, who played at NC State, played in the NBA for a long time. Great player.
Wow.
He came into NC State as a 6'6", 185-pound freshman. That was a favor for Coach Jim Valvano at the time, because Coach V and Tom Gugliotta's dad used to run summer camps up in New York together. Tom left that school 4 years later as 6'9", 245-pound number 6 pick in the draft.
Yeah.
And what do you think? I mean, granted, there's a lot of, like, he grew a little bit, but he worked his butt off. He got in the weight room. He wanted to be a great player. In today's day and age, if he had gone to NC State as a freshman at 6'6", 175 pounds and not playing a minute, where do you think would have happened? He would have been like, I want to go play. I want to go play at a smaller school so I can just play. Let me go to, Coastal App State or somewhere to go play college basketball just to get some playing time. He wouldn't have stuck it out. And that story makes him, what you talked about earlier about those hanging those rafters and retiring numbers and all those kind of things, is that story made him a great NC State legend, and put him on the map. And I just think that those stories and those kind of things that, as fans, that we have passion about are going to go away. Like I said before on your show, I used to pull for the name on the front of the jersey and the name on the back. Now all I do is pull for the name on the front of the jersey because I don't know the names on the back. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of different stories about why should they be loyal. Here's the thing. What are we supposed to be teaching them, John, in college? Lessons of life. And what if kids could hit the transfer portal? Tommy and John and Matt, we've all got kids. I got 4. Y'all all got a bunch. What if they just hit the portal? I hate you, Mom. I hate you, Dad. Well, they kind of do sometimes when they hang out with their friends all the time, but they come back to you when they go through that period. But I think that Tommy just nailed it. And I heard Desmond Howard Saturday on game day. There was a Michigan institution who'd been coaching there in the athletic department for 34 years. I didn't know this. Desmond Howard said, my freshman year, I was ready to go back home. I wanted to transfer. I hated it. And I went and talked to that coach. He said, come to my office. He said, son, what makes you think it's going to be any easier if you go somewhere else? And I said, okay. Desmond said, I'll ride with you. He said, 4 years later, I got a degree from the University of Michigan and a Heisman Trophy, and I'm connected to this place like I can't even describe. He was almost in tears. That's the story that you need to hear. How many doctors in medical school, when they're residents, working those 36-hour shifts, wanted to quit? One of them watching this show right now, Dr. David Arnoff in Panama City, Fort Walton, Gator for Life, talks about a lot of the, we hear about these young kids today coming into medical school. You jump on them and chew them out, and they wilt. We've got to get toughness back, John. Gary Harris is going to join us in a minute from Tuscaloosa. I think he knows a little about pressure. So far, it's a great deal for, Kalen DeBoer. But, where do you lose one? But I know they're probably stressed that they're not winning by enough. But a lot of stuff going on here, John. Lots.
Yeah. So here's what I would say, and this is probably more a personal view or opinion, because obviously and everybody talks about what's happening at Clemson with their football program and Dabo and, not adapting to the transfer portal and what that's done to him. But to me, and when I was growing up, one of the many life lessons you learn from sport is adversity builds character. You know, you learn a whole lot more from losing than you do about winning.
Yeah.
But now we have somewhat set, and there are reasons people transfer. There are valid reasons why people transfer. But the fact that the stars aren't perfectly aligned for me as an individual, and I'm going to go find somewhere where they are, that's not life. That's not life once you get out of it. And that's my concern, you know, with the whole deal. Quitting becomes habitual. Oh, this is too tough. I'm going to quit. I'm not going to do this.
Yep.
That's not good for sports. That's not good for the society of our world going forward, because if we're teaching that and rewarding that, the real world is going to slap these folks right squarely in the face when you know those things happen, because it's not if that happens, it's when that happens and how often it happens and how you are able to dust yourself off and get back up.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Matt.
Amen.
Yeah,
Amen.
thank you for it, because as all of us are fathers and husbands, I mean, I'm just saying that if you quit because this is too tough when you're 12, you're gonna quit everything tough the rest of your life. You better find excuses to hang on and find excuses to win. And I know when you have great success, it's easy to get caught up in all the fanfare, as Coach Dye used to say, all the loving from your mamas and daddies and classmates and girlfriends and all. He said, but you know you're gonna have to do it again tomorrow, so enjoy it tonight. But when you wake up in the morning, you know your ass is mine. And that's the way you got it. Tough. You know what he used to always say about when somebody's just keep loving on them. And the players that play for these great coaches like you, Tommy, and you, Matt, and you, John, you know what? You found out your coach loved you the harder he worked you. That's one thing, a great lesson in life. If you love somebody, you're going to be tough on them, Matt. And you know that, Matt. Your son's out there at Oregon. He worked for Jimbo for 4 years. Now he's with Dan Lanning. I mean, it ain't an accident that he's in this position. And I think a lot of that was the tutelage of his parents, you and your wife, but also Brother Joel S. McGraw at Christian Brothers High School, one of my favorite people of all time.
Yeah, but let me just throw this in there too, guys. And I think that I'm probably going down a path we probably shouldn't go on, but I think a lot of it starts at home.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of it starts with the parenting styles of how parents and it's a hard thing to do as parents, but you got to let your kids fail and teach them that failure is how to deal with failure, how to deal with tough times. And I think so many parents these days coddle the kids, and as soon as something goes wrong, they step in and help. They step in and make sure that it's okay. They don't want to see their kids struggle or whatever. That's real life stuff, is struggling, like John just mentioned. And I think that is where you see a lot of stuff, because I really feel like with these kids transferring and saying I'm out or whatever, a lot of the parents are supporting it. They're saying, hey, yeah, I agree. Let's go find somewhere else where you can be happy and play, as opposed to a dad saying, no, son, stick it out. You made a commitment, work your butt off and get better. If you want to play, go out there and work your butt off and play. And, and I think that's where as a society, like John was saying, I think that's where we're kind of falling short.
Yeah, Matt.
Hey, oh, I'm sorry, Rob. Just one follow up to that, because Tommy makes a great point. And I see this more often. I'll be interested to see if Matt does too. You know, I tell parents of student athletes all the time, I will talk to you about anything and everything. And I tell the student athletes that too. I will talk about anything and everything, student athlete welfare, you know, an issue with housing or your dorm or anything, but I'm not going to talk to you about playing time. But it is amazing.
Yes, sir.
It is amazing. And I've seen an increase in it. Maybe the transfer portal has something to do with that, about, you know, parents or handlers or whoever it may be will try to mask that issue with something else. But ultimately it comes down to playing time. I'm like, I'm not having that discussion. If your child is being mistreated or something's going wrong, right, I'm happy to deal with that. But if it's about him playing, this is not third grade where everybody plays 2 quarters and there's no scoreboard, because that's not important. Again, that's not life. And somehow we've gotten to that point in some cases now.
Matt, your thoughts on that? Because that's some great stuff. both of these guys, it's like we got Socrates, Plato, you be Aristotle.
That's a hard follow. Honestly, though, John and Tommy, great analysis. And I'll tell you this. So I was a 26-year coach, right, who made the transition to John's world. And one of the things that I found interesting, John, is I would get these calls and they were masqueraded in playing time. But like my going line was, hey, listen, we love your son or daughter, but there always comes a time when we as athletes look to retire and just become a student. And if it's not working out, there's nothing wrong with just being a student. But I'm not going to talk to you about playing time. We hire someone that makes an evaluation on your son or daughter. That's my coach. I got out of coaching. And I'll tell you this, getting back to the comment about development of young people in general, the hardest thing to do when you're a parent is, I told my sons early on, I have two boys, and I'm like, hey, listen, love you. I'm not your friend, I'm your dad. And I'm going to have to make some tough decisions. Obviously, I love my kids, so it's a friendship-like relationship. But there are times when you just have to make some decisions that are the better for them for a longer term. It's always that short-term versus long-term analogy. I think we want stuff to happen short-term. As a coach that recently got let go, and he made a great quote. He goes, Matt, in the short-term, this is really tough. This sucks, but in the long term, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And sometimes in life, that's kind of like the analysis. Short term wise, there is pain when a decision doesn't go your way.
Right.
But sometimes it's the best thing for you. And John, you're right. I'm just really amazed at the increasing number in 2024 of those conversations that go our way compared to back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. So it's a much different time in college athletics.
It really is. And I know Gary Harris is said he's driving. He's going to try to jump on. I hope he got the link. But I think what we're seeing right now is the kids moving around, the depth, the twos and the threes on these depth charts that we have in the SEC, Sun Belt, ACC, whatever. If you're not paying attention, these kids are going to show up on the other side of the field against you before you know it. That's why I don't like the term upset, and I definitely don't like the term, Tommy, unbelievable, because we're here as a product of our actions. I mean, this is what happens. And I know people will come up. Yeah, I know when a coach gets all that money after the initial shock of being fired, but you do have to think as a head coach about your assistants and your analysts and your student athletes and their families. I mean, you do carry a lot of responsibilities, but at the same time, you're paid well. You got to produce or you won't have a job. But that's the way it is in business too.
Exactly. And I think basically if you're a head coach of a big program, you're running a corporation. I mean, there are a lot of people underneath you that are going to succeed or not succeed depending on how you do as a coach and how the program does. And that's a lot of pressure, as we were talking about earlier. But and they have to adapt to the surroundings around them. Like we're seeing, like John was just talking about with Dabo at Clemson, not giving into the transfer portal and trying to make a statement there. Like I'll be interested to see how long that lasts, because Clemson's not the Clemson we've seen for the last on and off for the last 10 years or so, and so we'll see how that all works out for him. But it's a lot of pressure being a head coach, and I think in today's day and age, it's even more. I think like we talked about to start this whole program off, guys, you got to be a master psychologist. You got to be a great motivator. You got to be somebody that can instantly relate to all these new kids coming into your program and getting them to buy in. And if you don't, you're not going to be successful. And you don't have time to develop kids and say, hey, we're going to run him at the, he's going to be our B-back and let him run and get most of the touches, in practice and get a couple in the game, because we know next year he's going to be great for us when he steps in to take the one spot. And those kids aren't going to be around to take that one next year because they're going to be gone. So it's just a different world for coaching these days. And I don't envy the coaches at all.
Well, I tell you that I think what, I think what's going on and you're right. It all starts at home. And John, and one of our I'm hoping that, I'm hoping, because we've had some technical issues in the background. I hope everything's okay. But Gary Harris will just come on with us next week, and if Will Hearn can join us, and we'll see if he can jump on with us. But I think that the interest in college football, it's there. Will Hearn, you are here. Apologize about that. We'll get Gary on next week. Will Hearn is a student, sophomore over at Georgia with Bulldogs Illustrated. You know, I know his dad, John Hearn. He's tough. He's old school. And you're like that, Will. You're a sophomore already writing, covering Georgia. You know, you've grown up there in Marietta, Dunwoody. You know the lay of the land right now. How many times, have you been told, hey, when it gets tough, just get tougher, compared to the number of kids you see hitting the portal? We reference Georgia, what Kirby Smart's doing. You know a lot of those football players. He tells them, hey, you can leave if you want to, but if you stay here and you stick it out, there's a much better chance you're going to get developed and get to the NFL if that's your goal. You buying into that?
Absolutely. I mean, every time, I think everyone's dad tells them when you get knocked down, get back up. I think Kirby has absolutely, engraved that in his players' minds. That's why some players come to Georgia. They see the development, they see the route and path to the NFL, and some players have left and it hasn't worked out too well for them.
Well, in this panel here, we've been talking a lot about SEC, Sun Belt, ACC, a lot going on, but the interest in the game is there. Let's talk real quick about Georgia. Dogs are off this week, don't have a game, but they got one the following week in Tuscaloosa. That's going to be a big one. You struggled on the road, but last year you struggled at Auburn, went down to the last drive. You struggled at Kentucky before. You're going to have game. You're not going to be perfect every week. So I know John and Matt would probably agree. A lot of people have ordered flowers, picked out something to bury Georgia in. It's over, into the dynasty. It just doesn't work that way. If you don't have games like this, I think as a coaching staff, it makes it harder to tell them to take every opponent seriously, doesn't it?
Yes, sir. I'll just go ahead and start off with, that was my first time in Lexington, and that place for a so-called basketball school had one of the rowdiest fan bases I've ever seen, especially in a 60,000 capacity stadium. I was just blown away because I stayed up there with one of my buddies that goes there right now, and he was talking about no one really cares too much about football, but when we got there, it felt dang sure like everyone cared. The whole thing was blow by blow. That's what the coaching staff said all week, and it was blow by blow. You mentioned Auburn last year, and I think the one difference maker was this time we didn't have Brock Bowers to go down there and lead the way through the entire offense. It felt a little more slow paced than that with the scoring process. So it was a big deal. I think the team needed it.
Yeah. Tommy, I know you've got to get off here in a second, so I'll let you ask a question if you got to, and then let people know how they can follow you, keep up with Pack Production and all. But great panel this morning. And again, we'll have Gary Harris back on next week. Absolutely love that guy.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Rob. Always, it's a pleasure talking with everybody. And, I think it's hopefully we'll see some change in college sports as we continue to move down this path as far as the transfer portal, maybe putting some reins on it and putting some guardrails on it. But it is what it is for now. We still love the games every Saturday. We're still all tuned in. And just like Will was saying, even if you're a Kentucky, you're still a big fan and going to the games. And so that's really what it's all about. And, look forward to every Saturday. And this will be a good one, man. My Wolfpack are going to be tested against Clemson. We'll be playing our two freshman quarterbacks. So we'll see how that shakes out. And I think we'll see how good, maybe or not good, Clemson is as well when we play them, because neither one of us has really played. They haven't played anybody super tough yet. So we'll see how it goes. But you can always, my production company, Rob, is Pack 30 Productions. Do a lot of television production work out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and the Atlanta area. And that's it. But I appreciate you having me on, Rob. It's always a pleasure.
Always. No, we'll do it again here very soon. John, you hear the talk from fans of different schools and the people that follow these schools. Like I say, y'all are going out playing Texas this weekend. then you're going to get back into your conference schedule. The portal, we're now October 15th will be the 6th anniversary of the portal. That's going to be, I don't know, something to celebrate or not, whatever. Are we starting to see a pattern? Like, what is it? 50% of the kids that go into the portal don't get picked up by another school. Do you think that's starting to resonate and say, maybe it's not such a good idea to go because you're giving up what you know? And it's kind of like, don't quit your job unless you already have another job firmly in hand.
Yeah, I don't think the number is quite that high, but it's still, 35, 40% somewhere in there. And it's, the grass is not always greener on the other side. And at some point, you got to buckle down and do the work. But the dollars out there right now, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a Big 12 men's basketball coach earlier this week, and talking about, some of the dollar amounts just staggering as it relates to basketball. Upwards of $4 to $5 million NIL deal. That's more than a lot of guys in the NBA are making. Yeah. So at some point, there's got to be some correction of it. But just like you opened the show today, Rob, we can always talk about the issues that face us in college athletics, which there are. But the beauty of it, we're starting tonight with South Alabama at App State and going all weekend. They're going to be great games, great storylines, the thrill of competition and the fans and everybody involved in it. So it's, I'm not Chicken Little, and I don't think any of us are. The sky's not falling, or there's some things that we need to correct. Yeah, but the beauty of collegiate athletics, in our country is like nowhere else in the world, and will continue to thrive. We've just got to, back to Tommy's analogy, maybe put up some guardrails to keep it between the lines.
Yeah. Matt, and there's a lot of comments on here. Heck, I'm just saying, if you're a student athlete at a place, and at least, I think we got to break this down. With linemen, it takes longer to develop. Skill players, maybe not as much. But the making it so easy to quit is the problem I have with it. People can give you all kind of reasons why they want to leave and go somewhere. But Matt, I'm just looking here at the future, and Will, you see it in college now, but Matt, I do think we'll start to see a change. Maybe not as many people hit the portal. Do you think we'll go to 3-year contracts for student athletes, and then how does everybody get the same NIL? We know capitalism doesn't work that way.
I think that would be very difficult.
Yeah.
But let me just say this about the portal, because we always take the side where the student athlete wants to leave, right? There are high-level programs that spend a year with a young person and say, maybe we misevaluated, and they encourage kids to leave too. That is happening everywhere in the country. We don't talk about it. It doesn't get publicized, but don't kid yourself. This is not always student athlete driven. Maybe not at some of the smaller programs. I know we're obviously not doing it where I work, but I'm just telling you, I know for a fact that sometimes the student athletes are encouraged so they can go out and do their form of free agency and get someone they think's better. That's the world we live in. It's not amateur athletics really right now. It's more of like an NFL free agency situation, both ways.
Yeah, and people are asking, hey, why aren't we talking more about the games? Why are we talking about free agency and contracts and all? And I'm like, because that's a big part of what's happening now. So, talking about the games. Will, you've seen Georgia every year since you were born. They won 2 of the last 3 national championships. Didn't get it done last year. Okay, so this year you go on the road, you win 13-12 at Kentucky, you're off, and then you go to Tuscaloosa to play Alabama. Then you got Auburn coming in town, Mississippi State, and then October 19th you play at Texas. Week off, then you play Florida, at Ole Miss November 9th, Tennessee and Athens November 16th, UMass in Athens, and then Georgia Tech in Athens November 30th. Where do you see this Georgia team ending up? How good are they?
The more I watch, the more I've thought. I really think around a 10-2 final record is where I'm going with right now. I just that the Kentucky game caught me off guard, and a lot of people have compared it to Auburn and 2022 Missouri, but this one sort of just felt different. I really think if something doesn't change, and I'm gonna go ahead and say directly on the offensive coordinating, I don't know. I don't know how Georgia's going to be able to put up the points to compete with some of these teams like Texas, Ole Miss, and obviously Alabama.
Well, guys, I think we both would agree. Last year, Georgia's number one loses in the SEC championship game against Alabama, who was number 6, I believe. Georgia, or they were highly ranked, but when Georgia lost, they fell to number 6. And Bama won, they moved up to that number 4 spot. Georgia had a point to prove when they played Florida State, albeit they had a bunch of guys lay down and quit on them, and that is carried over to this year. If I'm a coach or a university, I tell a guy that does that, you're done. You're not coming back. Your scholarship's gone. You cannot quit. That's a problem. But thinking about this team, what he just said about Georgia, Matt, from what you've seen out of them, again, who have they played? They haven't played a ranked team yet, but they've got Alabama. It's going to be that's going to be a hell of a game coming up the 28th. Auburn, Oklahoma that night, Georgia at Alabama. And Alabama, at least Nick Saban, has had Kirby Smart's number. What's going to be different heading into this matchup, Matt?
I'm going to use an analogy that probably relates back to the Georgia-Kentucky game. So the week before the Georgia-Kentucky game, everybody thought Kentucky was done, right? Well, Mark Stoops, who's done a really good job at Kentucky, rallied the troops. They responded. They played a heck of a football game. Reminded me a little bit, Will, of when Georgia was up at Missouri a few years ago and found a way to win a game late against Mizzou. And that was before Mizzou had really become that team they are now. Well, I think we got a bye week for Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, this week, right, before they play Alabama. I know, as Blind Squirrel Sports says, that's a big blow losing Rutledge, the offensive lineman.
Yeah.
But I just think Kirby is going to use this performance in a close win, and they will respond, and I think they'll play a tremendous football game at Alabama. That's just my belief.
Yeah. Will, closing comments as we wrap up. Again, the SEC this year, how strong is it? You've seen Texas, you've seen Oklahoma play. Oklahoma has their first conference game coming up Saturday. Tennessee heads to Norman. That's going to be emotional for Josh Heupel. He played there, won a national title, runner-up for the Heisman, then got fired when he was on the staff with Stoops. Man, he's going to be emotionally torn. He said he expects the upper deck to be cheering for him and welcoming him with open arms. But what are you seeing happening here now that we're starting to get into some conference games in the next couple of weeks?
I just think it's that much bigger that there's a 12-team playoff now, because we've seen it in the past, but this is the first year in I don't know how long that I've felt like, other than last year, Florida State, Georgia could argue they could have gotten in. Before that, it really seems like there's a very dominant team. And this year, I feel like there's about, you mentioned SEC. There's about 7 SEC teams that I feel like could in some capacity compete for the title. So I just think it's huge to see these teams play each other, see where they stand. And in the end, there's going to be a lot in the playoffs, and we'll know more about them.
Yeah, I mean, the SEC and Big Ten look like they're going to have the majority. Wow, that's a real profound statement I'm making. But it's about the games. And a lot of people are saying, let's focus on the games. These talent fees, 10%. Tennessee, basically, that's a tax. That's a 10% increase in ticket prices to pay for NIL. I'm sure other schools will follow suit. So it's going to be fun to watch that one. But 1 through 16, Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Missouri, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. It's like the alphabet now. Anything, Matt, before we go, stand out that we're not talking about that we need to be paying attention to with the SEC race? He just mentioned 6 or 7 teams he thinks could win it. You agree with that? I think that's a great point, and it's a lot to think about for tomorrow's show.
Will's right, and one of the things I've heard on a couple of the Saturday morning shows has been like the SEC right now. People legitimately believe they'll get 5 to 6 teams in. Now, I'm not sure that'll pan out that way because what happens is that we beat each other up, right, as we go through the season. But a game we haven't mentioned today, Rob, and I'm sure you're going to talk about tomorrow. I think one of the most unique games this week is Arkansas at Auburn. I think now that Auburn's made the quarterback shift, and honestly, Arkansas is better offensively than they were last year. That's going to be a fun game to watch because we're going to see someone in the middle of the pack right now that we're not even talking about it, that gets hot with a favorable schedule that could get to 10-2 and be in consideration. I'm not sure that team is, but the winner of that game will become 3-1 and on a pretty good trajectory.
Yeah, look, great show this morning. Will Hearn catching Bulldogs Illustrated. He is writing about the dogs, the SEC, and college football. For our executive producer, Brendan Martin, man, I'm going to tell you what, there is so much to talk about, the games and all this other stuff, but we are the blessed people in the greatest country in the history of the world. We've got a great show in store tomorrow. Roman Harper, SEC Network, joins us. Chris Plank Show out in Norman. We'll talk about, he's on the Sooner Football Network, about the Tennessee and Oklahoma matchup. We'll have the latest on what's going on with Billy Napier in Florida, and catch that tonight on the Buddy Martin Show, Thursday edition. It's a great one. It's called orangeandbluebloods.com with Buddy Martin, Ben Troop, the whole crew, Gator Mania. But SEC, this is your headquarters for all 16 teams, SEC Sideline Sports Network. So follow us, support all of our great sponsors like Hewlett & Dunn and the Vitamin Shop and Exo Armor. And we will see you tomorrow morning. If you're looking for a dog, Web-Footed Kennels, Chris Aiken, my man up in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Go to Web-Footed Kennels on Facebook, the best dog training in America. See you tomorrow.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.